Good evening. Our big story: Israel has launched fresh attacks on Lebanon, including strikes in central Beirut and against Hezbollah targets. An Israeli attack in central Beirut reportedly resulted in 22 deaths and 117 injuries. The situation has impacted UN operations, with peacekeepers being caught in the conflict, leading to strong international reactions, including from India. Remember, there are more than 900 Indian peacekeepers in southern Lebanon, though most of them were not in the headquarters of the UN peace mission when it was struck. My colleague Mohammed Ghazali has been on the ground in Beirut for the last couple of days and sent us this report.
The situation in Beirut remains tense. 24 hours almost after the attack on the residential areas, there have been reports of UNIFIL members near the Israel-Lebanon border getting attacked by IDF. The United Nations Peacekeeping Department has criticized Israel as well as Hezbollah, saying that both the parties have created a situation which has put the UNIFIL forces at risk. Even today, in the last 24 hours, there have been two incidents, one in which two UNIFIL soldiers, two UNIFIL peacekeeping forces were injured, and there have been attacks on the UNIFIL headquarters in one of the areas near the Lebanon-Israel border. Meanwhile, the Russian president and Iranian president have met in Turkmenistan, and perhaps the Iranian president has asked assistance from the Russian president, Mr. Putin, for the attacks which have been going on by Israel inside Syria, inside Lebanon, and also an attack which is still awaited in the Iranian territory, because Israel had said that it will exact the price from Iran for launching those ballistic missiles into Israeli territory. Meanwhile, the other developments include that Israeli forces as well as Hezbollah is engaged in ground combat, and besides that, both the parties have been attacking each other's territory through aerial bombardment. As far as Hezbollah is concerned, it is launching rockets towards Israel. Israel has been targeting residential areas along the southern Lebanon, claiming that it is killing the Hezbollah commanders, but there have been civilian casualties as well. Inside Beirut city, the city has now become center for refugees due to the internal displacement of the residents of Lebanon, some of them who are trying to move towards Syria. There are many more, in millions, who are trying to get into Beirut city. Hotels across the city are also circumspect that perhaps if these people get into the hotels for taking shelter, maybe Israel will also target the hotels as well. The tourism sector has taken a hit, and it's an utter situation of confusion and chaos in the city, as nobody knows that which area will come under attack from the Israeli forces. Israel has also announced a couple of days ago that it will try to enter into Lebanon through the sea route, through waterways, to dismantle dismantle Hezbollah. Meanwhile, the United States have also been appealing Israel to go for complete elimination of Hezbollah. In fact, it's supporting the armed operation by the Israeli forces inside the Lebanese territory. As far as the Hezbollah is concerned, the opinion is divided in the society here in Beirut. We spoke to many people. Some of them consider Hezbollah responsible for bringing the war to the doorstep of Lebanon, but some say that had Hezbollah not been there, Israel would have occupied the territory weeks ago, like it had done back in 1980s and in 2006. But all eyes are now on the peace and mediation efforts by the Arab countries, by the West. Iran has also perhaps warned the Arab countries that they should not allow their airspace to be used by either of the parties who are involved in the conflict, else they will also face retaliation on their oil reserves by Iran. So a lot of developing situation in the Middle East right now, but aerial bombardments and attacks in Beirut as well as in other areas of Lebanon continues. Civilian casualty is high, and yet another day of utter chaos in one of the most peaceful countries in Middle East. In Lebanon, Mohammed Ghazali for NDTV. The situation in Beirut remains tense.
Well, let's just bring you the latest ground situation on a day when there have been further attacks which have taken place from Israel. The United Nations worried as well. Their facilities, remember, there has been a UN peacekeeping mission on the ground in South Lebanon for several years now, and it's been the second consecutive day when there have been, that facility has been hit somewhat. No casualties, however. We will, however, track the situation with many attacks now taking place in Beirut as well.
After 2 days of calm, the people of Beirut once again found themselves under siege. Israeli airstrikes in central Beirut killed 22 and injured 117, with this attack being the deadliest on the city centre in recent days.
نحن جنوب جينا عند خينا هربنا يعني منكسر جينا عند خي بس كنا قاعدين على البرندة الاولاد نحن قاعدين بالصالون فجأة ما شفنا الا شيء دفشنا لجوا عاد لو ظهرنا لبرا نحن اخواتي صرنا نمر على الاولاد هذا بس خي هون لحد خي رجعوا وهم يروح الواحد قلت لك اسرائيل انه حزب الله مخبي صواريخ بين العالم خلي امريكا وكل العالم تعرف اسرائيل حزب الله ما بيخبي صواريخ بين العالم ولا بس حد يخبي صواريخ بين العالم.
The strike in central Beirut came after an attack in South Lebanon, which injured 2 UN peacekeepers, drawing widespread condemnation from countries such as Italy, France, and China. Meanwhile, the UN called the strike a grave violation of international law.
The soldiers that were wounded were Indonesian. They belong to ASEAN. And obviously, I condemn the fact that there was shooting against the UN premise, wounding 2 peacekeepers, which is a violation of international humanitarian law. Peacekeepers must be protected by all parties of the conflict.
The Indian government expressed concern about a deteriorating situation along the Blue Line, stressing that the inviolability of UN premises must be respected by all. The impact of the continuing conflict in West Asia has not been limited to Lebanon. Yesterday, an Israeli strike hit a school shelter in Deir al-Balah, killing at least 27, including 2 children. Israel has repeatedly struck many such shelters, claiming that they are militant hideouts. However, displaced people are bearing the brunt of this sustained campaign.
هذه إدارة مدرسة، إدارة للكابونات، للحوامل، لتوزيع المية، كلها إدارة ما فيش فيها مسلحين، فيش فيها حماس، إحنا مدنيين هان، نسوان، أغلب المدرسة هذه نسوان.
The conflict seems to show no signs of letting up, with Israel stating that Hezbollah was stockpiling weapons in a home in southern Lebanon, stating that their forces would dismantle Hezbollah, terrorist by terrorist, weapon by weapon. Kartikeya Bhattacharya, NDTV.
Well, joining us now, Avi Melamed, a former Israeli intelligence official. We are also joined by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, Sarbaz Rahullah Rezvi, a journalist in Beirut, and Mayan Navon, a former foreign relations officer of the Israeli Air Force. Thank you all very much for being with us. Avi Melamed, let me ask you this, and this doesn't at all question Israel's right to defend itself after the terrorist attack which took place last year. But the situation we are now seeing in southern Lebanon indicates that, there's been a fair amount of destruction on the ground, significant loss of life as well. The real fear is that, this can actually extend and go on for a longer period of time, and it is innocent civilians who end up dying. This is an international concern. How would you respond?
Well, Hezbollah attacked Israel on October 8, one day after October 7. It's not Israel who started this war. And Hezbollah all the time said that he's going to continue and attack Israel. And the outcome of Hezbollah's attack was that 60 to 70,000 Israelis became refugees. They have to flee from their own northern communities. But here is something I think that it's enormously bring to the discussion. The Lebanese people themselves are saying, we have been kidnapped by Hezbollah. We are occupied by Hezbollah. We are occupied by Iran. For many years, and particularly in the last year, the Lebanese people asked Hezbollah, urged Hezbollah, plea Hezbollah, do not drag us to this war. This is not our war. Hezbollah obviously ignored, because the Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy, and he was serving the Iranian interest. The Iranian interest is to trying to save Hamas rule. That's the reason they ordered Hezbollah to start attacking Israel on October 8. So what we see right now is the ramification of the fact that Lebanon has been occupied by Iran and Hezbollah for the last couple of decades.
Sarbaz Ruhollah Rezvi, the fact of the matter is that there have been consistent attacks for years from southern Lebanon into Israel. Israel says that they're defending themselves. Is it impossible on the ground in Lebanon for people to separate themselves from the Hezbollah?
You may answer my question that the building that was targeted last night in central Beirut, not in Dahia, that resulted in a massacre of 22 people, innocent people. I was there a couple of hours ago. I was in Al-Busta area, which is in central Beirut. It has nothing to do with Hezbollah. It has nothing to do with Dahia. And I was talking to the people over there. A teenager boy told me that One of the buildings was an abandoned building, but another building was a building where elderly people were living alongside with children. They were massacred there.
And you went to this building
Why they
yourself
were
a few
massacred?
hours back.
Yeah, you showed the report, and I was also there, and I talked to the people there. Which Hezbollah's infrastructure, which Hezbollah's figure was there when you massacred more than 118 people injured and 22 killed? Who was there? Why you massacred there? Why you massacred and attacked the medical centers in Beirut? What has the medical center to do with Hezbollah? What has the nurses done to you, Israelis? Those nurses whom you mercilessly killed and massacred, what they have done to you? 20,000 Gazan children and women, Gazan children, 20,000 Gazan children killed and massacred. What they had to do with Hamas, what they had to do with militancy, what they had to do with armed struggle, what they had to do with them.
You know, let
Instead
me
of
take that-
repeating
No,
again
you make
and
your
again,
you make your
these
points very
nonsense
passionately.
words, instead of
Sarbaz, I will come back to you in a moment. I take your points very, very strongly. Mine, I think that is a point that we need to perhaps reflect on. I know that Israel tries to do precision strikes. You have the technology very often to be able to do that. But these are intelligence-led operations, and keeping the technology aside, there is incredible collateral damage which is taking place. Now, you've got a reporter over there who makes an important point. Hezbollah may be there, Hamas may be there, but there are innocent civilians with a large number of people. How much more will innocent civilians suffer? I know your target is Hamas and Hezbollah, as well as, you know, as certainly the case must be. My question is about the human beings who are suffering, the women, the children, the mothers, the fathers.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And we are asking the same question. We are asking the same question today when a Thai worker were killed in the north from Hezbollah rockets.
Exactly.
I was asking the same questions when a month ago 12 kids were dying, killed by Hezbollah rockets in a kindergarten. In the end of the day, to remind you guys, we didn't start this war with Hezbollah. Hezbollah started that. For the last 11 months, Hezbollah keeps shooting at Israel on a daily basis. Our north is abandoned because the families could not live there anymore. Couple just died 2 days ago just by walking with their dogs from a Hezbollah rocket. So when you're asking why did it happen and why innocent people, you need to point the finger to Hezbollah because they are the one who started this war. And until 2 weeks ago, less than a week ago, Israel has finally started to give an answer. But until a week ago, the world was silent about it. Nobody came to help. The UN didn't condemn them. The other countries didn't came and help. Nobody stopped Hezbollah hands to do that. And I think the time when you're asking yourself, Sharbaz, why innocent people have to die, you need to point this question to Hezbollah. And I'm asking this question since October 7, and this is a time to point of the 101 kidnaps people that we still have in Gaza, that you started this war in Gaza, that you kidnapped those innocent kids and people and women.
No, Mayan, I take your point, but I think Sarbaz makes a more nuanced argument. He is not for a moment suggesting or defending Hezbollah. Completely to the contrary. In this conversation over here, he says that, look, I went to that place, I saw innocent people who were killed. Look at the number of innocent people who've been killed in Gaza. Now, this is a fact. It's not, and I completely accept your argument that it was Hamas that started it. It may have been Iran that has started it. All of that. I am looking at this tonight from a standpoint of humanity. And that humanity is certainly for Israeli citizens as well. The people who've lost their homes, who've had to move away, the people who were killed, there was an attack on a school, other facilities, etc., etc. So we are in a situation where we are saying the same thing. The people in Lebanon who have nothing to do with Hezbollah are saying, forget about Hezbollah, why are my relatives dying? The people in Gaza are saying the same thing, and the people in Israel are saying the same thing as well. So what is the way forward?
You know what is the result? You know what is the result? The result is that the popularity of Hezbollah...
Sarbaz, half a sec, I'll come to you next. Mayan, go ahead, and then Sarbaz.
I just want to point out one thing. The people of Hezbollah are the one we are targeting. We are not, and we are condemned every civilian casualty that died during that terrible war. The Israel army is one of the most care people that there is, and they are sending emails and letters, and they're doing a lot of investing in where the target is going to be, and they're doing a lot of investigation where it's
In
going
fact,
to hit.
let me
and
put
making
that to
sure there's
Sarbaz,
no
because you make an important point. It is true, Sarbaz, that the Israeli military has been telling people on the ground that you need to move away from your homes. They've done that for a period of time now.
This is not true. This is another lie. Another big lie of the Israelis. Last night, Israelis officially announced in their channels that they are going to hit and target some buildings in Dahia. This was announced last night. But instead of targeting those buildings, they targeted central Beirut without any announcement. Those buildings were not targeted in Dahia. Instead, 22 innocent people were massacred by Israelis. Is there any condemnation of Israelis? Could you show me any condemnation of the Israelis?
To be honest, you said so many lies before that it's hard for me to check this fact if it's true or not.
If you are going to condemn all your mistakes, if so-called these were mistakes, you have to put all things aside and just...
You said so many lies before also about the casualties in Gaza.
All right, okay, both of you one at a time. Let me go across to an independent observer over here, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. I'm just trying to look at it from a standpoint of what can be done to protect civilians on either side, in Israel, in Lebanon as well. In an intractable situation like this, what's the way forward?
Well, Vishnu, we have seen that both sides, especially the Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and the Israeli Defense Forces, they have just indulged in revenge and retribution, irrespective of the concerns for the civilian lives. So we have seen both sides what has happened. At the same time, this is also not only a war, it is also a war of narratives. And that you have just seen in the debate right away. The problem is that the innocent people are being killed everywhere and every time and every this thing. Now here we have seen that Hamas, what has happened to Gaza today, is completely flattened out. Very large number of people have been killed there. And has Israel become more secure? My contention is that whatever you are trying to do, if you think that you are going to be secure by doing that, I think you are living in a fool's paradise. It is not going to be that. And now with Hezbollah, they did a very precision strikes and killed the political leadership, the major military leadership of Hezbollah. But today, Hezbollah is more like guerrilla warfare. They will indulge in it, and that is not going to be easy for Israel even. None of the professional armies, and they have seen that 1 year in Gaza must have taught them some lessons as well, exactly how to deal with terrorism. We have been suffering from terrorism for 40 years. We have fought, but we have not gone after a community or a people, killing indiscriminately all of them. You have to deal with it in a different way. I think it is time that the Israeli government thinks about a certain different ways when the whole international community is standing against, except the US, which keeps on giving mixed signals. So I think that they need to take a different kind of an approach. By killing certain people, you are not finishing this ideology. You are not taking care of the terrorism aspect, because poor Lebanese are going to suffer now. This is the problem, and that's what is happening, unfortunately.
Avi Melamed, please do reply to the ambassador. But in addition to that, I have another question. There's a United Nations peacekeeping force, which happens to include 900 Indian soldiers plus 25 officers in southern Lebanon. Some of them were in that building which was targeted as well. The United Nations, I know Israel has problems with the UN right now, but the United Nations says, look, please don't attack peacekeepers. Is there anything that justifies that?
A couple of things very shortly. First, you should remember something very significant. There is a well documentation of the huge amount of missiles that Hezbollah has been storing in Beirut, next to the airport, next to hospitals. Well, this is one thing. I know that some people tend to forget that, but they should remember that. The other thing regarding to the words of the ambassadors, he's right. There should be another way. In fact, there has been another way in the context of Lebanon. Let me remind you, the United Nations Security Council issued 2 resolutions, 1557 and 1701, demanding Hezbollah to disarm itself, demanding the Lebanese government to take responsibility and the Lebanese army to be deployed along the Israeli border. None of this happened. To the contrary, Hezbollah built an enormous Iranian base next to the front with Israel, preparing itself to conduct an October 7th style attack on the state of Israel. And the third thing regarding the issue of the United Nations Keep Force, actually, we are talking about UNIFIL. This is a military power of the United Nations acting under Sanction 7 and was authorized to operate in South Lebanon to enforce Resolution 1701 and 1557. It failed to do that because it was bullied and threatened by the Hezbollah. The outcome of that was a total and utterly failure of the international community to impose its own decisions regarding the situation in Lebanon. Now, you should ask yourself what exactly the state of Israel is supposed to do in order to defend its citizens when the international community fails to do that.
Right, absolutely. Well, what we're going to do at this stage is that I'm going to just thank all of our guests for joining us.